Ilya, so you obviously you reported very extensively on the Battle of Kiev in the first weeks of the war. I know you've been a journalist much longer than that. I mean, today we're marking 3 years of the full-scale invasion. Did you ever think before all this that you'd be reporting on a war in your own country, and one that is so long and so bloody?
The thing is that, for a lot of people here in Ukraine, this war that lasts for 11 years already, including 3 years of the full-scale war, it's a thing that took like half of our lives, 1/3 part of our lives. So it's a thing for life. It's something that entire generation is focused on. We got used to living next to the war, and what we do for life in our lives is the war, the thing of saving this country, making it stronger, better. So to my generation, it's a normal thing to be living in such circumstances. So in my case, my contribution into this big thing that my generation does is working as journalists with foreign audiences. So I never worked as a journalist. I never worked in Russian or Ukrainian. Had almost no time writing in Russian or Ukrainian. So it all started for me since the almost very beginning in Mariupol when I was a student. So it's a thing that it's a very significant part of my life. So it's really hard to imagine my life without it, but I'll be happy when it's gone from my life forever. So I never thought that I'll be reporting about the biggest European war since World War II happening to just this country, just this place, the places we live, especially when it comes to Kiev, to suburbs of Kiev, these beautiful towns. But this is the world we live in. Nothing is unimaginable in Ukraine and to us.
Did you or did anyone really expect this to happen?
It's a very complicated question because this entire story of full-scale Russian invasion, it's so full of absurdity, discrepancy, stupidity too, delusional, and in general a very twisted perception of reality by so many people. And as we was, the full-scale invasion of February 2022, it followed a pretty long period of war crisis, of diplomatic attempts to prevent this war, of this looming threat, the gathering storm. And all the time, there were more than enough reasons for many reasonable people who know Russia, who thought they know Russia, to believe that this is just can't be real. I mean, this is so profoundly absurd. This is so profoundly in your face. This is so barely believable that just can't be real. And people who denied the possibility of the Russian full-scale invasion, like the way they portrayed it to be, the way it was described in media outlets with maps and arrows just covering the entire Ukraine, it seemed to be so absurd given all the circumstances. So I was among many people who were absolutely skeptical about this, because we tried to use the voice of reason. Is that this war is not beneficial to Russia, is that it's dangerous, it's going to be an unwinnable war. So this just can't be real, that they expect us to show no resistance, to take Ukraine over without like a major war. So it made no sense to people who try to think rational. But at the same time, there were a lot of people too who took very cautious approach to this, who were worried, emotional, angry about this, who had enough credit for themselves not to trust Russia, not to always percept Russia as deeply irrational player in this. So there were many more people who were pretty sure it's going to happen. But at the same time, the majority of people just tried to think rational. And one of the reasons why we had to evolve from absolutely denying the possibility of this with our rational minds to gradually accepting this is the fact that we basically knew we would come to this situation if Russia really does it, which is the hard, long war, unwinnable war for Russia, massive resistance, carnage, one of the largest wars ever on this continent. So we knew the situation would more or less be in this way, so which is definitely not what Russians wanted. So we were wrong with our rational approach towards this. We were deeply mistaken about Russia's ability to understand us. They were deeply delusional about what Ukraine is. And this is all played a bad joke, a really, really bad and sad and bitter joke upon every one of us, unfortunately.
What would you say was the turning point in the Battle of Kiev? Like, what helped turn the tide?
The thing is that I think there were at least two major turning points in the Battle of Kiev. I think by the day of March 8th, we already had a pretty strong feeling. We were absolutely sure and convinced that things got out of control for them. Plans had been like ultimately derailed. It started being obvious since essentially day 4, day 5, because the entire plan was about capturing it quickly. So, and if this one thing fails, the entire plan gets off the rails, and they did not have like a plan B. What if this jump on Hostomel airfield by Russian airborne forces just fails? And it failed. So they had just one chance, is to take Kiev in a shock and awe operation very quickly, standing against a paralyzed city and paralyzed defense forces, and possibly beheaded the defense forces. And it started failing on day 1 with the failure of Russian jump at the Hostomel airfield just outside of Kiev to gain a foothold for quick deployment of even more forces on airplanes. And I remember this moment, by March 8th, it started being absolutely obvious that the quick jump has failed, absolutely failed. And possibly the second turning point, which was the ultimate failure of the entire blitz to take Kiev, was the day of approximately March 22nd, 21st, with the Russian failure to enter the suburbs of Kiev immediately, the suburbs of Kiev city. They, the thing about trying to enter Kiev, to break through, was about crossing the river Irpin that runs west of the city. So there's a small town named Mashun, essentially the Kiev outskirt, and that was the only place where Russians managed to cross the Irpin river. And this was the only place, and that was the only chance for them to break even further and enter Kiev and start, initiate the fighting in the city streets. And after severe hostilities, Ukrainian forces managed to not only stop them at the town of Mashun, but also push them away on the other side of the river. So, and by the last decade of March, they were run out of steam, ran out of power. So, with the failure of the only chance to cross the river, the greatest defender of Kiev was this pretty tiny river. Mm-hmm. And with this failure, that was over for the entire operation. So, and no wonder that they spent about a week in fighting, in static warfare. And when it became obvious that it will never happen, so they opted towards withdrawing before it was too late for them. So this is what happened.
Let's talk a bit about more current affairs and specifically about the information war. Firstly, there's a lot of criticism against President Zelensky, people like in the United States and other places saying that he effectively controls all the Ukrainian media, and that like there's no media freedom. As a journalist, how would you react to this?
No, that's a wrong perception. You know, Ukraine is very far from being an ideal democracy and an ideal economy, and an ideal society, because there's no ideal nations in our world. But the thing is much more complicated than just Zelensky controlling media. Zelensky does not control the media per se. What they have is, due to wartime regulations, they only introduced something that we call the United TV stream, United Marathon as we call it. And it simply broadcasts news from the government point of view on TV, on several largest TV channels. Other than that, it's basically nothing, because 95% of media activities and news stuff and public discussion happens on the internet. Essentially, we are deeply unhappy about the fact that the government controls like top TV stations and pushes this stupid TV marathon. But at the same time, nobody really watches it. The thing is, many people perceive us as the kind of people similar to Russia, where TV propaganda and TV in general plays a major role, as we know it. That shouldn't be underestimated. But in Ukraine, it's about social media. It's about YouTube, Telegram. People who are loyal, political circles who are loyal to Zelensky, they are present in Telegram too. But at the same time, Zelensky has fierce rivals, such as Petro Poroshenko, such as Yulia Tymoshenko, lots of them. Same goes about media under their control, who push for their points of view. They also got their own TV channels, news channels, entertainment too. So it's much more complicated than Zelensky possessing control of everything. We in Ukraine, we have extremely brutal political life. It's super critical towards anyone who is in charge right now. We in Ukraine, we have something that we call like a Facebook democracy, Facebookocracy, something like this, because we trash authorities all the time on Facebook, and it's really good for the Ukrainian democracy, and it's something that really makes us different from Russia, because by default we have this in our society, that we are super critical to whoever is in power, and journalists, reporters, they scrutinize Zelensky beyond his political rivals. They scrutinize here, and reporters who are critical of authorities, and it's very important, they get a lot of attention, a lot of support from the public society. And we have very normal situations when defense ministers were overthrown by journalists on corruption charges because of the mess that was happening with procurement, for instance, for the military, and it's something that we cannot forgive. Absolutely cannot forgive. So it's much more complicated in this. Ukraine could be compared to a boiling pot of everyone fighting each other all the time, and it's more about the internet, and something that no authorities in the world can control. The internet, not TV.
Propaganda levels against Ukraine, mostly, I think they've been up to levels we have never seen before, probably. I mean, it's been 3 years of constant like fake news, misinformation, and all the stuff, which is also sadly promoted by very, very influential figures. You have the most, the richest man in the world, with 200 plus million followers, constantly pushing this kind of propaganda. Do you think Ukraine is losing the information war in that regard?
I think Ukraine has an extremely hard time, increasingly hard time with this, in this regards, in this informational war, and it gets even more complicated, and it gets harder with the time, which is why we spent like years yelling about the need to provide Ukraine with the aid right now, as quickly as possible. we were striving to bring this message that you cannot prolong this, you cannot, spend way too much time, contemplating and thinking, and because the more time passes, the more power gets the voices who criticize, who are dishonest about this, who push propaganda, because it always starts with enthusiasm, with everyone's admiration. People who admired Zelensky in Ukraine after 3 years of not seeing a clear end in sight, of a lot of influence from dishonest voices of propaganda, of voices that discredit Ukraine, after a lot of mistakes also made by Ukrainian authorities in Ukraine as a nation, by the lack of understanding what it's all about. So the more time passes, the harder it gets to still get the attention of people and still telling them what it's all about and why Ukraine matters. And I would say it's a miracle. We really think so. It's a miracle that it's been 3 years and people still care about this. Still a lot of people. Ukraine is still in the focus, in the world spotlight. Partly it's because the war, it's so in many ways historically unique. It's so dramatic. Sometimes it feels like a fictional story, because there are so incredibly dramatic things happening to this country. The entire situation is so black and white in this regard. So we have a situation where in our world, Ukraine still gets a lot of attention, but unfortunately it gets harder. And I'm not saying we are 100% successful in this, in countering the arguments made by evil minds, and it's natural. And nonetheless, because of this nature of very honest cause on the Ukrainian side, we still have a lot of attention, and we still have hearts and minds to talk to. So yeah, well, there are lots of things that work against us, but also a lot of things that work for us and help us bring this message.
What do you make of the current situation with the United States? I mean, it seems that the whole world has turned upside down with regards to...
Oh yes, oh yes.
I mean, a lot of people kind of expected this of Trump, I guess, but others here, a lot of people here, I think, were optimistic that things would be better under him.
It's also one of the many complicated questions about today's world and today's events in Ukraine, because when it comes to the United States, a lot of people here in Ukraine were deeply unhappy about the approach of previous U.S. administration towards this war and towards assisting Ukraine and resisting Russia. This overcautious approach of infamous escalation management, all those attempts to give Putin space for bringing him back to reason. All these years that were wasted with all this procrastination and deliberations and attempts to bring Putin to reason. So many people were and are deeply unhappy about the Biden administration, because it's secret to no one that many things that the previous administration did made no sense, and it effectively made things worse because of many reasons. Nonetheless, even in our domestic audience, we try to be rational about this. We try to be less emotional and more rational about this. And even inside our info space, we say that yes, Biden administration made a lot of mistakes, but we should be grateful for what we have, because without them, we would be gone, 100%. Nonetheless, they precipitated their mistakes, precipitated a lot of problems that we have today, and because of that. As Trump was about to take power, and as we were expecting the U.S. results too in elections, a lot of people were talking about the chance. So with Biden, we had an approach that is deeply mistaken, that leads us nowhere, essentially, that was leading us to bleeding out completely and collapsing at some point, inevitably collapsing at some point. And Trump, with his unpredictable nature, with his rival spirit, was seen as a hope that he will make things different in a different way. So Unfortunately, things ended up being much more complicated than that. But one of the things that we learned amid this war is that no defeat is final, no problem is unresolvable. There is always a way to go. If we just had given up, starting from the February 24th, and even if we decided that it was all over for us, so we wouldn't exist right now. And because of this attitude of going on, finding a new way despite everything, we are where we are today. So I think we have overcome a lot of barriers, a lot of nevers, a lot of obstacles in our way. So I think this is one of many things, and our way forward is really hard, but I think we'll find a way for this too. There's always a way. If the US withdraws completely out of this, we have ways to go. It's going to be an impulse for the rest of the free world to boost their assistance to us. We took our time to increase our own production. So, for instance, we have this threat of Starlinks being disconnected from Ukraine. It's going to be a big problem. It's going to be a major challenge, but at the same time, we have options. We have options how to at least mitigate this problem in the military. So, no matter what happens, there's always a way to go for Ukraine, as long as we decide that we don't give up. Yeah.
One final question about, your personal opinion. I would like about what would a just outcome be from any peace talks?
Well,
we're talking
just,
about
yeah,
20% of the country is still under occupation.
Well, if we talk about justice, it's going to be the complete withdrawal of the Russian military. It's going to be an international court-martial on war criminals. It's going to be reparations for all the damage done. If we talk about justice and decency, fortunately, the world works in a different direction, and in many ways, it's because of a lot of mistakes on our side and also on the side of our partners. We gave Russia way too much time to recover, to adapt, to increase their own production in the military, to find allies too. So a lot of opportunities have been wasted. So unfortunately, I don't think that we can talk about justice, but we can talk about practical things. So I think the most acceptable option out of this for Ukraine is Ukraine formally accepting Russian occupation of certain areas, Ukraine not making any territorial concessions officially, would not recognize the Russian sovereignty over occupied territories. Ukraine getting a steady and complete support of the Western economies, Western militaries in terms of defense production, modernization of the Ukrainian military, many things that last for decades and provide us with instruments and weapons, and all those things that make Ukraine too dangerous of a victim to be attacked again. So on our side, it's about starting a new page in our lives and working to make this country stronger, and essentially Ukraine learning its lessons from this war and continuing its build up as a leading military power in Europe. I don't believe in NATO, even if we are provided with formal NATO leadership, with the level of trust inside, with all those events that we are seeing right now, with the way leaders treat Article 5 right now, and their readiness to actually implement it in the event of the worst. So I don't believe in in NATO anymore, to be honest. So the best guarantee for Ukraine and the best outcome out of this for Ukraine is Ukraine staying alive, staying sovereign, independent, Ukrainian the way it is, proud to be alive. That's going to be a victory. And the day, hopefully, this active war ends for now will be the day one when we have to start preparing for the new one, for a new war, if we don't want to happen again. So